You'll tell a stranger your salary before you tell your best friend. In the UK, talking about money is almost offensive and it's costing you. I'll give you an example. The other day I was at a barbecue and I was talking to my friend whose house it was, and I just asked them the question, what offer did they put in on the house? For me, it's interesting. I like to understand the value of assets and make sure that I've got a good grasp on those sorts of things. And the answer was very evasive. It was a bit over budget, and sort of then changed the subject. It took me about 3 or 4 questions to get the answer. And why is that? Why are we like that in the UK? I think it's really damaging. I think if all of us understood a little bit more about different money products and the value of certain things, we'd all be better educated and we'd all make better decisions. I think the more we close ourselves off, the more likely you are to hear one piece of advice and go along with it, even though that might not be the right advice because you've not been able to build a collection of different opinions. If you compare that to somewhere like the US, the difference is really stark. So the US have always had a much more of a friendly culture around investing. It's encouraged from a young age. And why is that? I think if you're in the US, you probably would have no idea what a SIP is, because we don't really broadcast that sort of stuff. Whereas I think most people watching this video will have heard of a 401k or know what it is. Now there's lots of reasons for this. And one of the main ones is in the US, there is far greater emphasis on self-sufficiency. The individual is responsible for the family, not the state. Whereas the UK, we've gone through a series of governments that have introduced more and more social reforms which have helped build security blankets, which in many ways is a good thing. But from an investment point of view, it has kept a lot of that shielded. So in the US, as an example, I read a stat the other day, about half of the population are one paycheck away from housing difficulties without that security blanket beneath them. So the emphasis on providing for yourself and protecting your family is far greater. Therefore, they are encouraged from a young age to understand these things so that they can go on and have the tools to live a life and have a family and become a provider. Now, this starts from a really young age. There's a stat I read recently that in the US, 28% of Gen Zs have financial education in school. Now, the number is far smaller in the UK, and that needs to change. I actually go into schools myself. I do a few educational talks. I find it really encouraging actually when I do go, because there is the appetite to learn about money from as young as 13. There just isn't the infrastructure in place for it to become a regular thing on the UK curriculum. Now, that is hopefully changing, and it will become part of the curriculum from 2028, so that is encouraging, and hopefully that will help shift our mindset when it comes to talking about money. Now, education doesn't just happen in schools, it also happens at home, and again, there is a far greater emphasis on financial education coming from parents in the US. That again comes down to the whole idea of self-sufficiency and looking after yourselves and the 4 walls that you live in and the family inside it. And to do that, they've realized from an early stage that investing is the number one thing that helps them to do that. So they talk about it openly. They encourage their children to start investing from a young age so that by the time they're 18, 20, 21, start to have their own families maybe, they've already got a grasp of it, they understand the benefits of it, and they're well on their way to already having been investing for years. Now compare that to here in the UK, where you'll have definitely heard the phrase cash is king. And at times, that's been true. However, for the majority of people over a 50-year lifetime, that is not true. That will guaranteed erode your wealth over time. Another thing is our obsession with property. In this country, hoarding wealth through bricks and mortar has become a cultural thing. And it's actually to our detriment, because there's now so much illiquidity that could be in the economy working harder for us that is just hoarded. And with that hoarding of wealth in property comes privacy, and that gets prioritized, and therefore the conversations around money just doesn't happen as much. Thirdly, investing in this country is seen as risky, and there could be lots of reasons for that, but it could well come down to the class divides that we've had in this country for a long period of time, where the discouragement for the working class to invest has been through, that's not really for you, probably shouldn't do that, that's a bit risky, that's seen as gambling, and investing is more for the already wealthy. because they know what it can do for them. So that's changing, and I think the government have done some good things to start encouraging people to think about their own investments and how they're going to fund themselves, because ultimately the government know that down the line is becoming a large problem when it comes to actually paying for people's retirements. State pensions are becoming increasingly unaffordable. More people are reaching state pension age and less people are paying into the system. So it's a necessity now for the government to encourage people to start thinking about their own investment journey. And that starts with education. So what is the real cost of that silence? Well, I'll give you a quick example. Some clients of mine had done lots of things right throughout their life when it came to their finances. They'd consistently saved, they'd always lived within their means, and they'd managed to build a significant amount of wealth. And their children had gone through a relatively difficult time. So their daughter was struggling to pay rent, and she had 2 children. She was going through a divorce. She ended up having to take an extra job, and a lot of that was kept from her parents, because another issue we have in the UK is we tend to sort of keep our problems bottled up. We don't share them. We feel like we're burdening people if we talk about our issues, and she didn't do that with her parents. And on the flip side, her parents saw money as a taboo subject and didn't discuss it with her. Now, all of that could have been avoided very easily and nipped in the bud, and she could have been massively helped out by them communicating a bit better about those two things. Another example, a friend of mine approached me recently and asked me some relatively basic questions about finances. And after a little bit of digging, it came to light that he had a good chunk of savings invested in stocks. He had a small stock portfolio that he'd managed, and he asked about the taxation on these stocks. And my first question was, well, where are the stocks held? Are they inside an ISA? He said, no, I just have them in a trading account, and he's been building this trading account over time. Now, the stocks have performed quite well, so he's now thinking about potentially taking some of that money out and using it to do some renovations on his house. Now, if he'd spoken to me a number of years ago, or if he'd spoken to somebody else, a financial planner, a friend, a family member, and they'd spoken to him about ISAs, he'd have opened up his account and invested in those stocks within the ISA. But the situation he's in now is that all of those stocks are held outside of the ISA, and anytime he makes a sale, he's going to make capital gains tax on it, which is going to cost him in real terms. So how can we break this taboo in the UK around money? Here's some practical steps. Talk to your best friend about your salary. Talk to your best friend about your pension contributions. Talk to your partner about income and expenditure and credit cards. And the next time you're at a barbecue or a gathering with your friends, have that conversation around investing.